Hey everybody, my name's Razor. Welcome to another tutorial, and if you've been here before, welcome back. Today we're going to be cooking up a vibey, guitar-based Central Cee type drill beat. There's some good tips all the way through this tutorial, so stick around to the end and hopefully you'll get something from it. With all that out of the way, let's get into the cook-up. So first of all, I fired up this fingerpick bank in Contact. And then I laid down this nice sounding progression. I used the 1-4-5 technique that I'm pretty close to banning myself from using anymore. But it does sound nice in this case. So now for a little bit of guitar sauce. First up is how we actually lay out the notes. So to mimic an actual guitar being played, we can stagger or strum the notes like this. And you can see the notes are getting shorter the further up we go. As I'm going up, I also like to repeat the root of the chord as one of those notes. And finally, it's good to add even shorter notes, making sure to stay within the key, but this adds a nice rhythm and authenticity to the pattern. Next up, we've got a little pitch technique that I've learnt recently. The first thing you need to do to achieve this is to select random notes in your pattern. You can do this in FL by pressing Shift and R. This will highlight one note at random in your pattern. You can then press Shift R again and it will keep those notes highlighted whilst highlighting further ones at random. If you aren't happy with the randomly selected notes and you want to add more in or feel there's not enough in one particular chord being selected, you can keep the ones that are selected and then hold down Ctrl, Shift and left click. Dragging over a note will add that to the random selection. Once you're happy with the randomly selected notes and think you have enough, you can press Alt and R to bring up the randomizer. Then you need to make sure that Reset Before Processing and Bipolar are both selected. Reset Before Processing is fairly obvious, it will just reset everything. And Bipolar means any changes that you make will go up and above where they are currently rather than just going one direction. You can then play with the pitch knob and I recommend adjusting it by 2 or 3%. What this does is mimic a real guitar player, because when they hit the notes in real life, they won't hit it perfectly every time. It'll be slightly off pitch, so this helps to replicate that. And just to show you what it does, you can hear the pitch change when it plays the randomly selected notes. Obviously it's an extreme example, but I just wanted to show the actual effect. As far as processing goes, I don't have any effects on the guitar itself, but I do have an RC20 on the melody bus. Actually I have two, one for the intro and then a different one for the rest of the beat. The first 8 bars of the intro I also have an EQ on there with the radio preset. This is because I want to make it sound older and slightly washed out for the intro. Then for the next 8 bars I keep the RC20 on but take off the EQ, as well as adding in some extra instruments as I build up towards that first drop. And when it comes to those extra instruments, in this case I've got a piano and some strings. So first the piano, and all I've done is take the bass notes from the chords, drop them down a couple of octaves. As far as the sound itself, it's the Studio Grand preset inside Addictive Keys. And for the strings, I've used the strings of Winterbank inside Contact and gone for the Trills halftone preset. I then picked out notes from the chords, made them shorter and stabby, and then staggered them for a nice effect. And for the strings processing, I just added a simple Valhalla reverb. As I liked how they sounded, I just wanted to soften them a little bit. And altogether, the 3 instruments sound like this. As far as the vocals go, you know I love looking around for free vocals, and it just so happens that Slate Digital put out a free pack last week called Terra Nova. Unfortunately, I think it was only free until the end of April. I ended up picking these and I'm really happy with what I came up with. Obviously with vocals, especially free ones that everyone might have, you want to make it a little bit different. So I chopped some things up, I changed the pitch on a couple of the samples, had one of them repeat twice, just to give some variation and make it a little bit different. And here's the vocals for the instruments all together. pleased with how the vocals sound alongside the melody. I think they complement it well and fit with the vibe. Just a little bit about the automation that I've got on the melody, because it looks complicated but it's really not. So for the first 8 bars of the intro, I've got that first RC20 playing, and that alongside the EQ radio preset plays together and just gives it that older vintage feel that I talked about earlier. The EQ with the radio preset then turns off, but the RC20 stays on for a further 8 bars as the piano and the strings come in. All this is doing really is building up the energy for that first drop and hook. As we get to the end of the 16 bars, the tape stop kicks in, which stops all the melody, which then adds to the impact for the drop and the hook. Once we get to the hook, there's a second instance of RC20 that plays. This RC20 has the Vinyl 3 preset, and this plays for the duration of the beat. There is one final piece of automation for the 8-bar bridge, where I've added a Fruity Love filter with the high pass preset, messed around with the X and Y a little bit, and automated it to come on at the start of the bridge and come off when the bridge finishes. I knew I wanted the guitar playing on its own with a couple of extra, probably new elements in there, so I looked through some flute phrases. Turns out that's quite hard to say. Who knew? I found some in the right key that I thought sounded good, so I went ahead and added those to the bridge. Finally, I found some more vocals, some lower ones this time, added those as well, so I've got 3 elements playing in the bridge. This is how they all sound together. And for the drums, I actually went for a hi-hat this time rather than a counter snare for the first time in a while. Then I went ahead and laid down this pattern. Plenty of velocity changes, little gaps every now and again, some rolls and additional notes to give it that extra bounce in places where I felt it needed it. And for the snare, I chose to layer them up again, but went for a simple drill snare pattern, nothing crazy. If you've seen my tutorials before, you'll know that I tend to go for a simple snare pattern and not to overcomplicate it. One thing that I do like to do though is double it up on the final bar for a little bit of extra impact. I find you can also chop that up and use it elsewhere in the beat. Then I laid down a pattern for a counter snare, and this one's panning left and right constantly. It's also a different sound to the hi-hat so you can hear it and it's not clashing. I like to add this towards the end of the 4th and the 8 bars, as it adds to the bounce and gives it a different feel. I then added these perks, one shakery type one and one sounds a little bit like knocking on wood. I looked for gaps in the drum pattern and added them where I thought they would go and add to the bounce. And altogether the drums sound like this. I have several different 808 patterns in this beat, but they usually follow the root notes of the chord, but if not, they'll pick out other notes from the chord as long as they sound right. I'll go through shortening and lengthening notes where I feel they need to be shortened or lengthened, adding slides, etc. until I'm happy with it. I'll then go through and add kicks where the 808s hit. I won't add a kick where every 808 hits, as I feel that's a bit too much, but I'll mess around with them until I think the balance is right and we've got enough, but not too many. So as I said already, for the first 8 bars it's just the guitar playing, with the RC20 and the EQ making it sound older and vintage. Then for the next 8 bars, as the EQ goes off, the piano and the strings are brought in, along with the snare and the hi-hat. It's worth noting that I had to take the strings slightly off grid as they hit a little bit late, so I held down Alt and left clicked and I could drag them until I thought they were in the right place. Once we get to the end of the 16 bars, the tape stop kicks in, taking out all the melody at once. The riser then plays and we have the drop for the hooks. I went for a delayed drop on this occasion, so I didn't bring the 808 or kicks in until the 3rd bar. What I did do is have some of the vocals play for 1 bar along with the rest of the melody, but I put the vocal up 1 octave higher than it was originally. Then everything stops playing for the 2nd bar, before it all comes back in along with the 808 and the kicks, and the full hook starts. One thing that I did do just before everything comes back in was I took that double tap from the end of the snare pattern and added that in just before everything plays again. I thought it might grab the listener's attention and just added some impact before it all came back in. Then the second 8 bars of the hook are exactly the same as the first, but without the delayed drop. And then for the verse, to lower the energy, you stripped it all back to just the guitar, and then I introduced the piano in the second half of the 8 bars. And for the drums, I've just got the hi-hat and the snare playing, but I have taken out snippets of them every now and again to add variation. I then brought the 808 and kick in for the next 8 bars. I also added those strings in, but I didn't do it immediately as I wanted to highlight the 808 and kick being added. You'll notice that I took out the hi-hat and the snare right at the start of the bar for the same reason. For the next 8 bars, it's the same elements playing, but I created a new 808 pattern so it wouldn't sound identical. I also chopped parts of the drums out for similar reasons. Finally, as we got towards the end of the 8 bars, I took out the strings and added in one of the vocals from the hook. I did this to keep things fresh, but also to transition nicely into the bridge. I've already gone into the bridge in depth, so I won't go through it again, but you can hear it transitions nicely. The final hooks are similar to the first hooks, but I created another 808 pattern, so when that delayed drop happens, it plays the 808 rather than the gap that happened the first time, which I think is a nice bit of variation. Finally, for the second 8 bars of the hook, instead of having the vocals play again, I took the flute from the bridge and added that instead. And then after all that, I was looking for a nice way to end the beat. So I ended up taking the guitar, extending the first bar that plays across to 2 bars. I also added in the piano, an instance of the strings, and just one note from the 808. I then automated the master volume to fade out, and boom, there's my ending. So that's the beat complete. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I could see Central Cee slaying this one. Let me know in the comments who you think would sound nice on this. And if you like how the beat turned out, don't forget to leave a like. And if you're still here and watching this bit, big up to you, I appreciate it a lot. And that pretty much wraps it up. Until next time, stay safe, be productive, and I'll catch you on the next one.